All right, we're live today, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest. On today's episode, I interview a ERYT 500 yoga teacher, owner of Bodhi Tree Yoga in Regina, Saskatchewan, voted Regina's best yoga studio, writer and featured teacher for Yoga International, as well as religious studies, sociology, kinesiology lecturer at the University of Regina. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Colin Hall.
Hey, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So like as we were talking before this call, things have been odd for us all this last year, but I like to start things off on a positive note. And my first question to you is, Colin, what do you love about your world right now?
There's a lot. There isn't one thing, but the consistent thing is, and this is going to sound a little bit like I've been reading too many New Age books, but the thing that I love about my world right now is the thing that's happening now, and that thing is constantly changing. It's never the same thing. So at this moment, I love that I'm having this conversation with you right now. And there's a lot of things about the world as it is right now that's facilitating that. This technology that we're talking over right now, it blows my mind. It's really, really cool. And when we hang up off this conversation, I'm going to hang out with my kids a little bit, and I'm probably going to hang out with them more right now than I would have last year. I'm probably going to appreciate that time a little bit more now than I would have in previous years. And yeah, it sounds corny, but like whatever the day brings for me, I'm going to try to be present. I'm going to try to be awake in that moment. And I'm going to end up loving that. Now, is that always going to be good? Is that always going to be enjoyable? Is it always going to be a phone call with a friend or time spent with my kids? No. There's definitely going to be challenges. There's going to be hard things in the middle of all that as well. But I'm going to love being awake through those challenges. So kind of a corny answer, but it's a true answer.
Absolutely. And that's what we're looking to share, the truth. And one way that we connect with our truth is by connecting with our mission. Just like all companies, businesses have missions. I believe it's important that we as individuals recognize our mission here in this reality sphere. And that mission is always changing, but our mission is something that encompasses us in all our roles, whether that be your role as a father, as a yoga studio owner, as a lecturer. Your mission overrides it all. So, Colin Hall, what is your current mission?
My mission, and it's again a little bit like being in the moment. It is in flux. Like I try to be responsible. And what that means to me is having the capacity to respond. I need to respond to the world as it changes around me, and it's changing. So rather than having a mission statement or a plan or a goal or one thing that it's my job to accommodate or my job to accomplish, I am always in flux. Like I'm constantly changing. And I would say that my mission is to remain in flux. My mission is to remain flexible and be changing so that I can respond to situations as they arise. Because I think that it's actually really easy to get so wrapped up in your goal in the thing that you want to accomplish, that you might not notice that you actually no longer want to accomplish that thing. I think it happens a lot. People reach the top of the mountain, they look around and they're like, why did I do this again? What what was the thing motivating me again? Once they get there, they're like, I'm not sure this is actually what I wanted. So um, yeah, I feel, Derek, I feel like I'm probably going to be a voice talking to you today, that doesn't necessarily give you a lot of straight up answers, um, that are well thought out and, like, you know what I mean? Here's my mission. This is what I'm going to accomplish.
Mhm.
And I hope you're okay with a couple more loose, ethereal answers, because that's really where I'm at right now.
Absolutely, and I welcome it because that is who you are right now, and I wouldn't want you to present anyone but that on our episode and to our listeners. So, getting to where you are right now has been a process, and I feel you've embraced that process rather than destinations, as you've alluded to. We live in a society where when I get this job, when I get this career, when I get this house, when I get this relationship, I'll be happy. And then you get there, and it's now what? And it's a failure to appreciate the moment, the present, the sweetness on that trail, on that path. And that's why this podcast is called Going for Your Win. Welcome to the winner circle, because we could all we could all be winners, and being a winner is just observing, embracing the now, moving forth to a destination, but recognizing by saying yes to that path, other doors may open that never otherwise would have existed. Many people are listening right now, and they say they may be envious of your knowledge and of your wisdom and your availability to be fluid, to be present. And they say, well, that's because he has all these decades of experience. But just by setting sight, well, I want to be more in the now, like Colin, you're doing it. We're on the same page. We could all be winners. What does being a winner mean to you, and how do you go for your win in your life today?
Um, you know, I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of self-congratulatory moments. Like I don't spend a lot of time reveling in any glories, or being like I did it. I don't even take much time to kind of self-congratulate my wins or my accomplishments. I remember this was quite a few years ago. I was teaching yoga for another studio owner. We both owned yoga studios at the time, and we were like, just to keep a good relationship, let's each teach a class at each other's studio, um, which I thought was kind of fun. It didn't work out very well, but the idea was really good. Anyway, at one point, while after I taught a class, I was talking to this other studio owner, and she said, you must be so proud of your accomplishments. And I kind of stepped back for a second, was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, just all the things that you've accomplished. And she listed off some stuff. And I suppose, yeah, there is a pretty long list at this point of things that I've done. But I look at a lot of that stuff, a lot of the things that have happened for me, and a lot of the great things that have happened in my life, as things that really just sort of arose in the moment. They're things that happened, I think, to a large extent, because of context, because of the situation I happened to be in. So, I mean, without flagellating myself too much, I'm from a very middle class family. My dad was a teacher, and we grew up at a time where one income would sustain a whole family of three kids, and my dad's a teacher, and that's it. My mom, she had jobs here and there, but she really basically kind of stayed home and looked after us. Her job was to build me up and make me a sort of a confident, healthy young man, and she succeeded in her job. And so now when situations arise, I just naturally kind of feel like I can do it. Now, is that actually my accomplishment? Or is that really more my mom's accomplishment? You know, did she did a good job of raising a confident kid who felt like they could do it. And so that moment for me, that win, that feeling of like I did it, of accomplishment, for me, kind of it always has a bit of an asterisk to it. I always take a moment and go, okay, let's look at all of the people, all of the random accidents in time, like all of the just situational things that arose that led to this moment. And for me, that is a two-part project. On the one hand, it's about humility, making sure that I don't start taking myself too seriously. I don't start thinking of myself as invincible, because I know that's not true. And on the other hand, it's just engaging with reality. The reality is our hero's journey is interdependent with so many different people and things, and it really looks from the outside as though it is us. It's one individual against the world, rising above, and that's what the movies tell us. You know, that's the story. But I think when you look really carefully at the story, what you see is something quite different. I think you see teams. I think you see friendships. I think you see people raising each other up. And I do my best to always think about all of the people who pushed me into the positions that I find myself, where I feel successful, where I feel like I've won. I do my best to remember that was only kind of me.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was me, but kind of me.
Yeah. So you've mentioned your parents as being a big influence on you. Let's discuss some other mentors and helpers that helped you on the path, and what were your major takeaways from these particular individuals that come to your mind?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I my when I started off in university, I was actually in journalism school, and I still do. I love news, and I've got like like heroes of mine in the news. I love Ian Hannah-Mansing from CBC. I just love that guy. I love Rachel Maddow from MSNBC in the States. But so I wanted to be in journalism, and I just took as an elective a religious studies class from a guy named Kang Nam Oh. Kang Nam is really well known in Korea. He's a Korean writer, famous actually in Korea. In Canada, nobody knows who he is. And he was teaching religious studies courses at the University of Regina. Fairly thick accent, Korean accent. And people, because he had an accent and because they didn't know who he was, gave him very little respect. Just didn't really take him seriously. But I got into that class with him, and he took me seriously for no reason that I can see. I was like some punk kid, 19 years old. Well, let's not get into what I was like when I was 19, but Kang Nam saw something in me, and he would have me write essays, and then after class go to his office and read him the essays. I had to read them out loud to him. And there'd be moments where I'd be reading this essay and he'd just sort of look at me. And the moment he looked, I had already done the correction myself. Like I heard myself say the thing and was like, oh, that didn't make any sense at all. That was a dumb thing to say.
Mm.
And Kangnam gave me this capacity for self-reflection that I think should come standard when you're going to university. I think this is one of the main things that university teachers should be teaching. But um, boy, that guy, he he really changed my path. So that as a result of that one class, I dropped out of journalism. I started doing religious studies, and that's one of my main passions right now. Like still to this day, now 25 years later, I'm still studying religion as a result of the guy. So he was a huge influence on me. And another really big influence is my yoga teacher. He's a guy named David Mccammon, another guy that very few people know about. Um, he's been training yoga teachers since the 1960s. Um, Hard to find somebody with more experience than this guy, and quiet. Again, like just sort of you don't see or hear a lot of him when it comes to well-known Canadian yoga teachers, well-known yoga teachers globally. Well, when you start compiling that list, you start seeing a lot of young faces, or youngish faces anyway. And David's in his 70s, not exactly what you'd call tech savvy, um, but quietly um, has amassed a massive amount of students from around the world. He did a retreat. I'm blabbing for a sec here, but just give me this. He did a yoga retreat a couple of years ago that was free in Mexico. You had to get yourself to Mexico, um, but he didn't take any money for it, and he just contacted all of his students who had become yoga teachers from around the world and said, "Hey, I'm doing this free thing in Mexico. Do you want to come join me?" And so we get up in the morning and study with him for a little while, and then he would just sort of pass it over to you. So and there was people from all over South America, all over the United States, all over Canada, somebody from India, and we just taught each other. And I mean, this guy who's phenomenally intelligent, has an incredible amount of information and experience at his fingertips. And he brings people together, his students, so that he can learn from them. Unreal, unreal. The humility to to find a really well-known yoga teacher like that, that's so experienced, who at 70 is like, hey, to you, yoga teacher in your 30s, what have you been studying? You tell me. And I think David's done a lot for me, just in terms of maintaining a sense of humility, and maintaining. And I'll stop. I'll stop here. But maintaining this sense of place within the scope of yoga history. Within the scope of yoga history, which is anywhere, depending on how you want to map this out, anywhere from, like, say 2,000 to 5,000 years old. We are a little blip. We are. I don't know that Canadian yoga teachers in the 2000s are really going to show up in the history books. And I think that remembering that just when you're engaging in something at this scale, and I think martial arts is the exact same situation, when you're engaging in something at the scale that we're dealing with here, that this sort of massive historical scope, you had better learn how to bow.
Mm-hmm.
And David really did that for me without insisting on it, like without being like, you shut up, be humble. Never once said that to me. In fact, encouraged me to speak. But it was his humility that really kind of showed me, without him ever saying it, a lot about how to relate to yoga today.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about yoga. What does yoga mean to you? And can you trace back a bit of your origin story? So you started with David, and just kind of give us your history of yoga and what it means to you today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the story's a long one. I'll keep it short because I've already kind of started.
Yeah.
That yoga that religious studies teacher that I was talking about, Kangnam O, he read one of my papers and was like, "Hey, you know what you would really like is this book called the Yoga Sutras." And so he gave me a copy of the Yoga Sutras. I had never, I had seen yoga before on TV, but like mostly kind of as a joke. It was like stand-up comedians doing jokes about yoga and people with like fake limbs wrapping them around their heads and stuff like that. So I'd seen yoga as a joke before, but I'd never thought of yoga as like something that I would do. And I read the Yoga Sutras at maybe 18 or 19 years old, first year university. And man, it just landed. It landed on me so hard. It rung true. And I don't know why to this day. I don't know why this, 2,000-year-old philosophy, for some weird reason, connected with this, white kid from Saskatchewan. It's bizarre, but it did. And so I started studying yoga at that point, which is a big part of the reason I switched over to religious studies, is so that I could learn more about this stuff in university. And I did that for another 5 years or so, just studying it, maybe doing a little bit of meditation, but for the most part, just reading about it before I ever did any postures. I never did downward dog or a handstand or a back bend or anything. I did nothing. I was just reading about this stuff. And so I really took an interesting path into yoga. Most people start with the postures. They started with yoga as a workout, and they, through shavasana and relaxation, kind of find their way to meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and that leads them to philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But I went the exact opposite route, where the very last thing that I ever did or considered was yoga as a workout. Yoga as like an exercise. It had never even occurred to me. As it turns out, it's great. I love it. But that was very, very low on my list of priorities originally. And so that kind of sets the stage for how I think about yoga now, is that I think about yoga, I think, largely backwards from how people usually see it. Where, in my imagination anyway, I think a lot of folks look at yoga practice and think to themselves, you start off with simple little stretches and relaxation techniques. And then eventually you get a little bit more flexible and you start doing more demanding postures. And then eventually you find yourself doing these incredibly acrobatic, artistic, aesthetically pleasing, Instagrammable things. I think of it quite the opposite, like absolutely backwards from that, where the only thing that can hold your attention initially is the fancy stuff. Our minds are, we're so prone to distraction. Media culture makes our minds jump from one thing to another so fast. And so only the shiny things really can hold our attention. So these postures become kind of shiny and we're like, ooh, that's fancy. And it's through these fancy postures that you can see, hopefully with a good teacher, hopefully relatively soon, like within weeks or months, that the postures are kind of no big deal. They don't ultimately matter all that much. And that first quiet moment, sometimes it's after class in Shavasana, or sometimes before class, or sometimes even like after you get home and you're sitting down, this quiet moment where everything stops and there's nothing happening. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. It's just quiet, but you're still awake. Like you're still here. And it dawns on you. Again, corny moment coming up here. But it dawns on you. I am a human being. I don't have to be doing things. I don't have to be doing. I can just be, because I'm a human being. That's the yoga. For me, that's when it really sort of lights up. And I think that it fundamentally changes our relationship to ourselves, where we can finally stop striving and stop trying to change and improve and get better. Because I think that entire process ultimately comes down to not liking who we are. And so you get this moment where you're like, oh, there's nothing to do and nowhere to go. I'm just here. And there's a sneaky, it's subtle. I think a lot of people miss it. But when you're just there in this quiet moment, it's good. It's perfect. There's nothing to change. There's nothing to do. And that's you. It's a weird thought, but you're perfect. Like you don't need to change anything. And here's the irony, is that in that moment, something changes. It's in that moment where you don't want something to change. You're not looking for something to change. Everything's perfect. Mm-hmm. That's when change happens. That ends up being this sort of transformative moment.
Mm-hmm. So as yogis, yoga teachers, and human beings, how could we embrace more of these moments of being?
Well, the thing about human beings, we're all different. Snowflakes or whatever. not like the liberal snowflake type, but like uniqueness.
Yeah.
We're also different. And so I'm fairly convinced that there isn't a program or a system really that we can implement all that effectively. I wish there was. I wish that was true. People working within lineages are usually convinced that it is their system, that is the one universal system that's going to work for everybody. And it's fine. I get it. It's the system that works for them. And so I wouldn't want them to change. I wouldn't want anybody to stop doing the system or working within the lineage that they're working within. But I would ask for a little bit of humility in recognizing that, I mean, the thing that's going to help you to fall asleep at night is probably different than the thing that helps me fall asleep at night. Our morning routines probably look a little bit different. The foods that we like are probably different. The music that we like is probably different. And that's awesome. That gives us lots to talk about. So I don't know why we would assume that the path to awakening should not be different as well. And so it's tough. It's tough as a yoga teacher because it's my job to tell people this stuff. And so when I tell them, sorry, no one system, have to just kind of figure it out, I think it's a little bit disappointing. But there are multiple paths to waking up and having more of these moments of stillness. And it's a practice, right? It's trial and error, right? You try a whole bunch of them and some might work.
Yes. And it's I feel what you're talking about is self-inquiry, inquiring within the self to find our own individual answers. How do you encourage that self-inquiry practice within your children, within your students, and within all?
Well, with my students at the university, so when I'm teaching university classes, I make sure every single class has journaling as a part of it, and I weight the journals heavily. So I'm going to give upwards of 20% of your grade in a semester based on your journals. And those journals, I'm not looking for you to answer questions. I'm grading them based on how much time you spent on them. I'm grading them based on like how much effort did you put into them. That's really the thing that I'm interested in. And so for me, journaling is huge. I think is really, really important. And again, I'm gonna bring back Kang Nam. The moment I realized that was the moment I had to read one of my essays out loud. And it dawned on, I had this moment where I was like, well, what am I doing? Did I write this for me? Why should I have to read it? Right? I wrote it for you, dude. You read the damn thing. I don't want to read it. And then it dawned on me, no, I did write this for me. That's why I wrote it. And so any time we start asking ourselves questions about our motivations, even about, look, here's a great little window into self-inquiry. We get asked the question, how are you? How many times in a day? I mean, less now that we hardly see anybody, but it's the question. Hey, how are you? How are you doing? That we get asked that. How often do we give a really honest answer to that question?
Mm-hmm.
Rarely, really, really rarely. So we could use all of these random people in our lives who say, how are you? Without even really thinking about it. They're just trying to be polite and saying hello. But we could use them as a stimulus to wake up. Because every single time we get asked that question, we could give an honest answer. We could actually take a moment to reflect. We could have somebody say, hey, how are you? And we could say, give me a moment and I'll tell you. And we could stop and just notice how we're feeling and then say it. And more likely than not, the people that ask the question are going to regret that they asked the question. They're going to be like, you know what? I actually kind of have to go. But it's not about them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not the point. And we could take that even one step deeper if we wanted to, where instead of answering the question, how are you, which is a value judgment, right? There's like a good or bad in there. We could reframe that question. And instead of, hey, how are you feeling? We could ask ourselves the question, what am I feeling? And just try to label it, right? So right now, if I ask myself that question, hey, what am I feeling? Well, I'm a little bit tired, actually. I didn't sleep very well last night. I am a little bit, I don't know if it's nervous is the word. My daughter calls it nerve-sighted, when she gets nervous and excited. Anytime I'm recording something, I get a little nerve-sighted. I'm nervous and excited. I'm just happy to be here. I like doing this stuff. It's fun. So I feel that. The chair that I'm sitting on is not particularly comfortable. My butt hurts a little bit. Now, I don't have to change any of those things, right? I don't need to like now, okay, well, now I better start a better sleep regimen. And I better start recording more podcasts, and I better get a more comfortable chair. I don't need to do anything about it. All I need to do is sit and notice, what am I feeling? And then start acknowledging those things. And that alone is going to kind of like spark a little bit of this moment of presence where I'm like, oh, well, this is actually happening now. Like, this is live. This is not a recording. Like, this is literally live. We are, it's as though we're on a train. I use this analogy all the time. And we're out on the front of the train, throwing down the tracks as we go. That's exciting. It's a little dangerous. We are like living life live. And it seems like a bit of a jump to go from my butt hurts to I'm throwing out tracks as I drive this train. But it's not. It's not. In both instances, it's an acknowledgement that what's happening now is live. It's real. This is life. And we are sort of creating our present and our future as we speak and as we breathe right now. And if that doesn't wake you up a little bit, like if that doesn't make you kind of like perk up in your seat and be like, oh shit, sorry I swore, but if that doesn't,
okay.
if that doesn't put a little bit of fire underneath you, I don't know what will.
Mm-hmm. As we lay down these tracks, I want to ask you another question. You answered the question, how are you? Now I'd like you to answer this question. Who are you?
Yeah, well, and here we sort of slip into a bit of an abyss. It's a lovely, lovely abyss. But I don't think we know. My take on it is that, again, analogies I use all the time, but a knife cuts all kinds of things, cuts everything except for itself. Our eyes, they see things. It's just what they do. They're constantly seeing things. They don't see themselves. Even in a mirror, they're not seeing, your eye is not seeing itself in a mirror. It's seeing an upside down and backwards version of itself. We're not getting an accurate reflection. The mirror might be dirty. So who we are is knowing and seeing. And because we are the seeing, because we are the witness, we have an inability to witness ourself. Like a flashlight, more analogies, but like a flashlight can shine light on so many different things, on an infinite number of objects in the universe, but cannot shine a light on itself. I don't think, as a human being, that we can honestly answer that question. I don't think we know. I think it's a mystery. And our rational, planning, thinking mind goes, oh, well, then it doesn't matter. Come on. One of the weirdest things that has ever happened is the decision that things that are unknown are not worth our time. Oh, that's absurd. It is one of the most valuable and wonderful things you can possibly do, is to slip into that abyss and just be in that infinite space of unknowing and uncertainty. It's beautiful, it's relaxing, it's humbling, scary, mysterious. It's actually one of the definitions of religion is mysterium est tremendum. It's mysterious and tremendous. It makes us tremble. It's actually like it freaks you out a little bit. And that's the goods. You know what I mean? That's the stuff in life that I think it's the reason why people like roller coasters and bungee jumping and stuff, is they want that sense of like being on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we don't need to jump out of planes. We can if we want to. We don't need to jump out of planes to get it, right? All we really need to do is consider who we really are.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings you right up to the edge of emptiness, of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. And that place of unknown is very scary for many. I believe, as humans in general, we like to find the known, the comfort, and we often stay there. How have you avoided that pitfall of staying in your comfort zone, of staying in the known, to step into the unknown and explore the bliss, the wonder of that path?
Yeah, that's it. That, here's the thing I don't like when people are on podcasts and they say it, but I'm about to say it. That was a really good question. That is a really good question with, I think, a really interesting answer. How is it that I am able to kind of like rest at the edge of the unknown? How is it that I'm able to let go of who I think I am? How is it that I'm able to drop all my like thoughts, memories, attachments, and just let go into this infinite mystery? Well, very sort of big, spacious, esoteric kind of notion with, I think, a very grounded, practical, maybe even somewhat disappointing answer. I think some people are about to shake their heads a little bit and go, "Ugh, no, don't say that." I think it's privilege. I think it's privilege, honestly. I feel safe. I always have. Um, I'm I'm a pretty big guy. You know, I'm 6 feet tall. I have this like higher vantage point than most people do. Um, when I'm a middle-aged white guy, middle-aged white dad. When I walk into a store, people always smile. People always smile at me constantly, man. I swear it's the weirdest thing. I've had people ask me why I'm so smiley, and it's because everyone's freaking smiling at me. What am I supposed to do? Um, Everyone's always been so kind and so nice and so thoughtful with me. It seems like the entire world has just been trying to help me. I recognize that is not the case. I, I've never I've never been really taken advantage of by a mean or deceptive teacher, right? I've never been placed in the position that I know, I'm guessing a lot of people listening to this have been, where you trusted somebody and they betrayed your trust. You were asked to give up a part of who you are in order to learn something that somebody, I know this is really common in dance circles, where you feel demeaned and you're made to feel small by your teachers. And I never had any history of abuse in my life. And all of this stuff, the sum total of it means that floating in space, having the boundaries between myself and the world around me dissolve, it's actually kind of fun. Feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say the world was not quite as friendly to me. Let's say I didn't have that same ride. My suspicion is that that does not feel fun. That feels scary. It feels like I have fought and clawed my way to get some measure of security and safety in this world. And now you want me to let it go? Are you out of your mind? And so I feel like I have been placed in a very privileged position. And just to give this some historical context, like, this is why monasteries exist. This is why ashrams exist. The world is a freaky, dangerous place. Weird stuff happens all the time. And the idea behind a monastery or an ashram is to get to a place where it's safe to let go, where it's safe to drop your identity and your notions of who you are. You can actually sort of put your mask down and no one's going to judge you for it. No one's going to take advantage of you for it. And sadly, I think that we live in a world where people relaxing their grip on their ego and on their identity, being open to change, being soft and fluid and vulnerable. It's risky. It's risky. There's too many predators. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing. Again, as a teacher, what am I going to do? Be like, oh, what you should do is be more privileged, and then then you'll be able to relax into the infinite mystery of unknowing. Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. So yeah, it's a tough one, because we stand at this intersection of spirituality and politics, or of religion and society, where they're very much intertwined. And I don't think that we can gain much ground and move very far spiritually until we're also willing to make some moves politically and socially. And I think that just opened up a huge can of worms, but probably best for me to wrap that one up before it gets spiraling out of control, because it really easily could.
So in this world of chaos and darkness for many, how can we find and cultivate those safe spaces other than going to a monastery or an ashram?
These are, yeah. What I love about this is that I don't think that there's a way for you to pre-package that question. I think that question could only arise in conversation. And just wanted to say how much I appreciate that. I'm on a lot of podcasts, and I get very often now, someone will just say like, well, that was interesting. Now let's look at something completely different. And you've just been following this conversation, which is brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's our community, right? It's the people we surround ourselves with. It becomes so important, that we don't necessarily get to choose our family. That one just kind of lands on us, and you might get lucky as far as that's concerned. And if you did get lucky, be grateful, because a lot of people didn't. But we can choose our friends. We can choose our inner circle, and I think that becomes really crucial. That we need to be around people who, if you don't feel comfortable crying, laughing hysterically, having an existential crisis, celebrating a victory, if you don't feel comfortable, like if you're like, geez, I better not tell this person about this awesome thing that happened to me. They might get jealous. They might get weird about it. So I'll just keep a lid on that. Or, geez, I better not tell this person about this terrible thing that happened to me. You know what I mean? They might start pitying me, or whatever, right? If you don't feel comfortable opening up with your friends, you need to find better friends. And I know that sounds easy, just find better friends, just like that. It was a heck of a lot easier in elementary school than it is as an adult. But I have practical advice for people.
Great, let's hear that.
Try, when you meet somebody who you think seems like an awesome person, they seem open and generous and kind and thoughtful and creative and the kind of person you want to be around, try saying to that person, hey, you seem really thoughtful and creative and generous and the kind of person I'd like to be around. This might sound kind of weird, but would you like to be friends? That's what we did in elementary school. We'd just come up to somebody and be like, hey, do you want to be friends? And you know what? It worked in elementary school. It did. People would be like, yeah, actually, cool. That'd be great. It works. So you can make new friends. I know as an adult, it seems like you can't, but you can, and you need to. And then, I mean, that's easier. The somewhat more difficult one is making friends with yourself. And that's just harder. But it's, you know, I think that we have, not only is the world scary and confusing and sometimes kind of dark and a little harsh, but I think to a large extent we have internalized that world. And before the world even gets a chance to shut you down, you shut yourself down, right? We have the thought, we're like, hey, nobody has ever written this book. Why has nobody ever written this book before? And before we even get a chance to have a publisher say, no, that's dumb, we say, no, that's dumb. And we don't even start, right? And I think that's way harder than finding new friends, way harder. But it's a really valuable project to start working on it. And yoga has some solutions with it. In yoga philosophy, there's some answers to that. So this is stuff that people have been dealing with for 2,000 years. So it's good to know that we're not alone and this is not new.
How do you battle that force, that negative force in the world that keeps us from fulfilling our dreams, which author Stephen Pressfield calls resistance, that we come up to day and day and day again? How do you overcome that?
Yeah. Well, in the Yoga Sutras, so spin this conversation back to my religious studies prof in 1995 in his office. There's a line in the Yoga Sutras that says, cultivate the opposite. And it seemed too simple at the time. I was like, yeah, that's good advice. Thanks. When you're feeling scared, cultivate the opposite. What's the opposite of scared? I suppose it's courage. I suppose courageousness is the opposite of fear. And so cultivate courage. Well, how do you go about cultivating courage? So think about farming. If you're going to cultivate courage, right, you're going to cultivate something. You don't start with a freaking cucumber. That's not the beginning. The seed is the beginning, and the seed is tender. It's vulnerable. You need to plant it, water it, weed it. You really need to take care of that thing. And so courage, I think, when you're trying to cultivate it, I think in terms of like micro ambition. Don't swing for the fences. I think that way too many of us are like, I know, radical, full-blown, full spectrum change across every part of my life today. I mean, best of luck. If that works, that's awesome. But I mean, the likelihood is it's probably a bit bold. Not that I have a problem with boldness. I like it. But how about if you're at the drive-thru and you get your order and you said no tomatoes, but you find tomatoes? How about spinning around, going through the drive-thru again? Not being mean, you don't have to throw the burger back in there, but just be like, hey, excuse me, I said no tomatoes and this has tomatoes on it. Can I get one without tomatoes, please? Just that. That's micro, right? That is really, really small. But you know, the reason why I think people would just say, oh, it's inconvenient. I just don't want to. I think a lot of it is just fear. People just scared to stand up for themselves, scared that they don't want to make a scene. They think it's going to be awkward. So you find these tiny little moments, these little things like, somebody says something racist. Our brains almost always do it. Our brains go like, well, that was screwed up. But then right away, ooh, you're going to get into a fight. What if you make an enemy? What if this happens? What if that happens? Uh-oh, better not do this. And next thing you know, the moment has passed. So really small thing you can do is somebody says something racist and you go, huh, that sounded racist. Not, screw you, you racist bigot. I'm whoa back. Just whoa, that sound, because, again, screw you, you racist bigot. That's swinging for the fences. You're trying to change who this person is. And I don't think we're ready for that necessarily. Small little things that you just find little challenges for yourself and try to cultivate the opposite. So, I mean, I have a tendency towards being a bit of a thinker and not much of a doer. My tendency is to not finish. I initiate projects, not so big. I don't care if they come to fruition or not. The joy for me is in the thinking, planning. Like for me, that's the gold. So I try to cultivate the opposite. I try to finish small things like actually wipe the counters after I finish doing the dishes. It's so minor, but it's huge.
Absolutely. Those small shifts lead to big changes, and it's in those incremental micro changes lead to huge things. And it's being patient. You've mentioned you've lived a life of quite privileged and a blessed experience, but it couldn't have been all rainbows and roses. So I'd like you to take a moment to acknowledge some of the challenges, in particular, the biggest challenge you've had to overcome, and how did you do so?
Well, I mean, finding the one, the one big one, I think is a bit of an invention. I think I would be just sort of choosing one at random and calling it the biggest for the sake of the podcast. I mean, when we started Bodhi Tree, we moved to Regina, which, for your listeners away from the prairies, that is how you pronounce it, Regina, small town in northwestern North America. But when we moved here 17 years ago, we took a few yoga classes and we were like, there really isn't a yoga studio that we like here. Let's just make it. So we just made it. And then people started coming. And, it just grew. It just did its thing. And we're like, it's growing fast. We need more yoga teachers. Let's do a teacher training. Boom. It just happened. We got so many incredible people out of that program, so many incredible teachers. And everything just kind of fell. It just kind of landed brilliantly for us. So much so we were able to sort of get out of renting. We were able to buy a building on 13th Avenue, and it just took off, and it just happened so smoothly and easily. And last year in March, it just stopped. The brakes went on. It just literally, for the first time, it was like, and it's over. Now what? And that happened, like, literally. We were kind of like, I remember in early March being like, is this going to be bad? Like, I don't know. It seems like it might be bad. I don't know. And then, it was just like, we need to close. We just need to close. And like, I think that a lot of people at this point, it's become so normalized to talk about sort of lockdowns and stuff like that. It's just so normal. But it's just like, you take the pandemic out of this situation and go up to a small business owner and just say to them, tomorrow, you're closed. You're done. Shut down. No more people allowed in your business. They're going to cry, right? They're going to be like, no, I've I put so much of my life and my money into this. And now it's just over? Like, it can't be. And so this has definitely been so hard, so challenging. And the thing that there isn't one thing that got us through. We're still alive, like we are still afloat. But instead of one thing, there's been a number of things. And like the support from the federal government has been huge. Without it, there's no way we wouldn't have made it. And I don't think many people talk about that. What is that? That's community, right? That's our nation, right? That's our government is our big community, and our big community has come together to keep small businesses alive. It's incredible. We did it. We're doing it anyway. I don't know if it's over yet. So that has been huge. The other thing is that my wife and I, so Sarah and I, run the business together, and we when this initially happened, we just made an agreement that we would not say no to each other. That what we're going to need to sort of pull off a bit of a miracle here. And so let's just go for it. Let's just see what we can do. Let's see how we can make it happen. And we agreed to not say no. That whenever anybody had an idea, we would say, yes, let's do it. Or yes, and let's also do this too. But there would be no no's. And I think that the support that we had for each other through this, that has really meant a ton, because we had to make some really hard decisions. I had to take a new job. I have like a regular job now for the first time in my life. Look, I am 44 years old, and I have never had a 9-to-5 regular job. Can you believe that? I've never had a job, man. I've never had a job. I've never had like a boss. I've never had like the regular thing where like you check in the morning and like you go for lunch.
Yeah.
Never had that. I had to get a job. So I just got a regular job just to try to stabilize our income and insulate our business a little bit from what's happening. And that was wild. But all of that was like, I think maybe I should just get a job. And Sarah going, yes. I don't want you to. I don't want that to happen. But yeah, let's try. Give it a whirl. See what happens. And so that has been huge. And then just the last thing, and again, this comes down to community. It's been the support of people who go to Bodhi Tree. We're exclusively online. We have no in-person classes. It's just live streaming yoga classes. That's all. And if people want to do yoga online on their computer, there are dozens and dozens of options for them. Some that are free, some that are like 10, 15 bucks a month, but people are actually choosing to pay more in order to continue to support us. I can't believe it. I can't believe people are doing that, but they are, and lots of them. And that, again, it comes down to support. That's just communities. That is your community having your back. And I have to believe, and I will continue to believe until I will just continue to believe. You support your community. Get behind your community and support it. Be a part of a community, and they will support you. You help people get through tough times, they will help you get through tough times. And I think that on a really big sort of like national level that we're seeing that right now, on really small relationship levels, interpersonal levels. I hope people are getting that in their life. I know I am. And then at sort of more regional or sort of local levels. Definitely those three things that came together rather nicely. But those three levels of support have that has been the thing that has enabled, I'll say me personally, it's really our business, but like honestly, if Bodhi Tree folds, there is a big part of me that's going to go down with it. It's been such a huge part of my life. And like we talked about earlier, I'm okay with letting go of that part of my personality. I'm okay with letting that part of me die. If that needs to happen, it happens. And it will. Every part of us is going to die. There's nobody and no aspect of your life is making out of this alive. So we better be okay with letting it go. And I am, but not yet.
So as we close this interview, I like to ask the guests 3 questions that I ask everyone. And the first one is quite the question. Through all your travels, the highs and lows of this journey of life, what has been your greatest life lesson that speaks to you now in this moment that you'd like to share?
You just don't know. There's so much unknown. There's so much uncertainty. And certainty will lead you down some pretty dark roads. It's just not a good idea. Fundamentalism and self-righteousness and nationalism and bigotry of all kinds, it is rooted in certainty, in this idea that I know what is right. I know what is true, period. Uncertainty is a sometimes bitter pill to swallow. The sort of humility that comes with knowing that you don't know. But befriending uncertainty has been, for me, the best thing that I've done is just honestly being okay with the not knowing. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know the next question you're going to ask. I don't know what my boss is going to ask of me on Monday. I don't know what this pandemic is going to happen next. I don't know anything for certain. I know nothing. And I'm okay with that.
Beautiful. Embrace that in the now. In 3 words, how would you describe the experience you were having on this earth?
Fun. Confusing. You know, the last one, I'm having a hard time just pinning down the exact word for it. I'm going to say appropriate.
Sorry, what was that? You just cut out a second.
Appropriate.
Appropriate.
It's appropriate. It makes sense. It is confusing for sure, but there's a level of like, I'm okay with it.
Fun, confusing, appropriate. And for the final question, I'm going to play with time because I believe we are all magicians, and I'm going to use some of my magical powers. And I'm going to transport us into the future, a time far from now, where we're alongside the 85-year-old Colin Hall. What is the life that 85-year-old Colin Hall is living? What is the legacy that you've left behind?
Well, I see myself with friends, with my people, definitely with Sarah, hopefully some grandkids, maybe great grandkids. Boy, would I love to get one of those photos of like the 4 generations thing. Boy, oh boy, that would be such a joy. And the legacy, I hope that, you know, when people look back at my life, I hope that they can say that I have opened some doors and helped people to ask better questions and help people become more curious and more interested in their lives and in the world, and ultimately that I don't think many people associate Regina, Saskatchewan with yoga and mindfulness and meditation, but maybe after another 40 years they will.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So as we wrap this up, I want you to picture this 85-year-old Colin Hall in your mind, still having fun with Sarah, your friends, your grandchildren, great grandchildren. Maybe you guys are taking that picture. And I'm not going to leave us there. I'm going to bring us back to the right here and now, the now, which is always. And that 85-year-old Colin Hall sends you a message. What does he tell you?
I'm pretty sure that he says, lighten up. And I'm going to say, dude, I am lighting up. And he's going to be like, no. Like, you don't get it. Stop taking yourself so seriously. Stop worrying so much. Just lighten up. Enjoy yourself. And I think 85-year-old Colin has the same message for all of us. Lighten up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation, and I can't wait to share it and inspire others with your story, your message, and just for us all to lighten up a little bit more. Where can they find you, Colin?
You know, I this is odd, but I do most of my writing on Instagram. I've become like, I write captions rather than essays. I write these short essays as captions, and I write the captions as memes on Instagram. So Colin Yogan is my Instagram account. When you look, if you go to Colin Yogan's Instagram account, what you're going to see is a bunch of memes, and you're going to be like, this guy just like spam posts memes all the time. Open the captions. Because there's essays. Every one of those memes has an essay attached. And there's a whole book worth of essays on that Instagram account, all attached to kind of silly memes. So that I would just recommend people go use that as an opening move. Just check out the Instagram account because there's a lot there.
Thank you. And I will go check that out today myself. To close all the episodes, we bring our fist in to the winner circle, a choice that we could all make. Thank you so much. And that is a wrap on today's conversation.